I will now make some comments about their socially and economically just society. First, in response to their economically just society, they claim they will allow consumer goods to continue to be exchanged on the free market. But they don't clearly explain what constitutes consumer goods. And they don't say if all consumer goods will continue to be available on the free market. Would they still allow the existence of an unhealthy consumer goods like cigarettes in our society? They may decide to label them as poisonous goods instead of consumer goods. Or instead, would they simply decide what constitutes acceptable consumer goods? We may or may not like cigarettes, but it is important to know whether someone else will be making those types of decisions for us, because if they are, they will ultimately ban some consumer goods we like. Next, the Democratic Socialists of America admit they want to assume control of areas like large concentrations of capital in industries such as energy, steel, mass transit, and housing. They will also include control of education, medical care, and many other areas. In other words, they will control all of our economic essentials. That doesn't sound scary at all, does it? I'm sure we can trust them, and I'm sure we can trust the people who come after them, right? Also, what other essential areas will they control? Will they attempt to gain even more control of the media? What about complete control of K through 12 and university education? In China, the government has complete control of K through 12 and university education. Homeschooling is illegal, and so are non-approved private schools. The Chinese government has a frightening amount of power over the minds of their youth and their citizens. Democratic socialists in America have already been pretty successful at controlling these areas with the little power we give them now. And this gets to the heart of the most pressing concern I have about democratic socialism. As Friedrich Hayek and Thomas Sowell consistently point out, if we accept democratic socialism, at best we will only be trading one inequality for another. We will be trading inequalities in our society for an inequality of power, meaning to accomplish the goal of solving inequalities in our society, we must give democratic socialists much greater power. And that necessarily entails that we Americans will have much less individual power and therefore much less freedom. It is one thing for our government to have goals we don't approve of as citizens. It's another, even more frightening thing to consider the means the democratic socialists will use to establish their socially and economically just society. What will happen when we don't get behind their socially just ideas? They will have control of our housing, our energy, our mass transit, our medical care, and our education? Will they punish us in those economic areas? Socialist countries of the past have consistently punished those who oppose their established collective goals. And even today, socialist countries are punishing those who oppose them. For example, Chinese citizens have social credit scores that are determined by collective priorities determined by the government. And if a citizen's score is low, they can be punished. A few examples of the punishments for low social credit scores are, as of 2019, 26.82 million air tickets, as well as 5.96 million high-speed rail tickets had been denied to people with low social credit scores. If parents have low social credit scores, their children can be denied entrance into some schools. and religious people can be punished if they don't practice their religion in accordance with the collective goals. China also has incentives for having high social credit scores. For example, it is easier to get access to loans, and there are more job possibilities when you have a high social credit score. What about the Democratic Socialists in America today? On their website, the Democratic Socialists of America say the government could use regulations and tax incentives to encourage companies to act in the public interest and outlaw destructive activities. However, I think in reality, we would expect a lot more than those mild punishments. We already see Democratic Socialists trying to punish people today through trying to cancel those who disagree with them or by trying to cause them to lose their jobs. They also punish through rioting, through violence, and through by many other means. Why would we expect their behavior to change if we give them more control of our lives? In addition, the Democratic Socialists of America say they are collectively working to win a world without oppression. Socialists, including our very own Democratic Socialists in America, have a long history of considering religion to be oppressive. Will they punish us for our religious beliefs? Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who lived and suffered in communist Russia, said religious people in Russia were supposedly being arrested and tried not for their actual faith, but for openly declaring their convictions and for bringing up their children in the same spirit. Solzhenitsyn then quotes Tanya Hadkevich, who received a 10-year sentence for saying this: "You can pray freely, but just so God alone can hear you." Could that be the future of religion in America under democratic socialism? You can pray freely, but just so God alone can hear you. Before I conclude, I'm going to briefly mention two final thoughts. The first, in this discussion, I've only addressed some of the specifically stated objectives of the Democratic Socialists of America and some of the common behavior we see from them today. Do they have some objectives they are covertly pursuing? This is not a conspiracy theory. This has been a common activity among socialist organizations and many other past and current radical organizations. It would be unwise for us not to consider or even suspect this to be a possibility for the Democratic Socialists of America. And finally, to top all of this off, in addition to the stated objectives and activities of the Democratic Socialists of America, and in addition to the concern they may have some concealed objectives, they admit the exact details for their radical transformation of society haven't even been fully formed. They want to radically transform our society, but the exact details haven't been fully formed. I guess they'll just figure it out as they go. That seems to have worked well for every other socialist society, right? In conclusion, do I think democratic socialism will necessarily be as bad as I described? Will our daily life be similar to what I have described in this discussion? I think it will if the democratic socialists gain enough power. If they do gain enough power, I believe they will attempt to alter our system of government to ensure they keep their power. However, even if they do gain a lot of power, there is the hope that until saner heads prevail, our current system of government will be strong enough to endure their attempts to radically transform America. You may ultimately agree or disagree with the conclusions I have reached in my discussion, but you cannot deny that this is an extremely important issue for the future of America. I want to finish off my discussion of democratic socialism by encouraging you to do two things. One, to remember, and two, to act. First, I want you to remember two basic ideas. One, an essential feature of a free market capitalist society is the individual freedom we have to own personal capital and the individual freedom we have to choose to do what we want with that capital. In other words, there is no better political and economic system that can provide greater individual freedom and greater wealth than free market capitalism. The second idea I want you to remember is any collective political and economic system, by its very nature, must prioritize the collective goals of the country over the individual's goals. You may end up being deeply opposed to the collective goals, but for the collective goals to be achieved, there must be some means for making you contribute towards their collective goals. Those are the two ideas I encourage you to remember. Finally, I also encourage you to act. We must take a stand for our country. We must take our stand now, and because our fight will not be easy, we must take our stand with strong character. However, due to the fruits of capitalism, many of us have grown comfortable in our lives, and this comfort has contributed to a growing deficiency that has become all too common among many Americans. And I include myself in this number. I am not pointing out this deficiency to condemn, but rather to encourage. I believe we Americans are a different kind of people, and I believe we can overcome this deficiency and rise to the new challenge we face today. Once we admit to and correct this deficiency, we will possess the unwavering determination that is essential for responding to the renewed challenge of socialism. The deficiency I'm referring to is a lack of firmness. That is to say, we lack the ability to be resolute in our determination or to be strong in our character. We Americans have often given greater value to our own firmness than is due. And it will be better for us to recognize and confess this failing now to ourselves and to our God than we should allow a few of our fellow citizens to continually demonstrate it to us. Can we name any other possible reason why we have spent these days in such blaring silence? Why do we continue to exhaust our existence with so deliberate a response as saying and doing nothing? The characteristic, a lack of firmness, has persuaded us to yield for fear of the ire of the radical few when a determined firmness could have caused us to rise as past Americans have risen to the challenges they faced. If we Americans are going to determine to become more firm in our resolve, a resolve to see our country return to a pursuit of truth, a pursuit of goodness, and a pursuit of God, we must first be roused by truth, roused by goodness, and roused by God. Once we have determined to become more firm in our character, by being resolute in the stand we take to protect our country, we should also determine to treat all people, even our political enemies, with love and respect. That does not mean we must agree with their position, since their position is flawed. We have truth on our side, so we can stand firmly together in that truth. And as Micah 6:8 says, we can do justice, we can love kindness, and we can walk humbly with our God. Regardless of what anyone else does, if we choose to do these things, we can look at ourselves in the mirror, we can stand with integrity among our family, and we can walk daily with our God in the deep peace only He can provide.